Hey guys, thanks for watching this video on YouTube. I just want to jump in and say that if you are not following the Work Awesome Network on all social media platforms, I highly encourage that. It's the place to get updates on blog posts, on new episodes, on basically anything related to the Work Awesome Network. So jump over to wherever you get your content from, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all the platforms. If you are interested, we also publish these same episodes on audio platforms, so you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. So if you would rather listen to this in an audio format in the car, on the way to work, in the office, I encourage you to jump over to those audio platforms and listen there. I also want to say, if you're interested in learning about the company behind the Work Awesome Network, AVIAN, you can jump over to the AVIAN website at avian.com, AVIAN.com. Thanks again for watching this video. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. It helps the video out. It helps it get in front of more people. Thank you again. And now back to this episode. Welcome to the Work Awesome Podcast. This is a little bit of a different episode. You'll notice I'm not on screen, but I am playing a little bit of a voice in the head for this one. Today I have Kelly, Sarah, and Joy with me to talk about transitioning from a stay-at-home parent to a new job. I don't have experience in this field, so I thought these three would be great at discussing this topic. And let's just jump into the description. There's a case to make that a stay-at-home parent is a full-time job, because it is. But making the transition back to the workplace after taking care of your little ones can be a challenge. In this episode, I'm handing over the hosting duties to the experts as they chat through the challenges they faced when they made the hard decision to come back to work. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to you guys. And Joy, like I said, I think you have a really cool topic to talk about and get this kind of started. So if you want to jump into that, feel free at this point.
Sure, absolutely. Well, to prepare for this podcast, Ian shared with us several articles, and one that really stood out to me was an article from Harvard Law, and it talked about these Fortune 500 companies and these larger companies that are now offering returnships. Like, instead of an internship, they're returnships, and they are designed specifically for parents to help them ease back into the workforce, maybe help them get caught up on their skill set. And of course, so much changes in a matter of a year or two. So imagine being out of the workforce for 4 or 5, maybe even 10 years, some folks. But I thought to myself, that is such a great idea. I think that's just an awesome opportunity to tap into kind of an unrecognized resource, and grab these parents who are looking to return back to work. And they obviously must have some type of skill set. They've already had a career. Mm-hmm. And this would just bring them back up to speed and get them prepared to return back into a career. And it just really stood out to me as something that I think more companies should take advantage of, because, again, there's probably a whole pool of people and candidates that companies may overlook simply because they see that gap in employment. But this returnship would also fill that gap a little.
Yeah, and I'm in a good situation, I think, here at Avian, because I think we recognize that there is that sometimes there is a very good reason for gaps in employment, and we don't just dismiss that as this person is not qualified. If we're looking at the whole resume, not just one time span. And I was a stay-at-home parent for a good deal of time. I'm not going to tell you how long, because that would really age me. But I really was looking forward to getting back into the workforce, and I did kind of what you're talking about a little bit in a volunteer setting. And I actually my undergraduate degree is in communications, and I volunteered for a nonprofit and did some communications for them. And then I went back to school, and then I started working part-time. And actually, I joined Avian part-time as well, and then transitioned to full-time, just because we felt like that was what was best for my family. My husband did a lot of traveling and deploying.
I think we can all speak to that.
I think we can all speak to that. And we just decided that we needed, that there was a benefit to having me at home during those times, but I definitely was anxious to get back to work. when I felt like we were in a place where our family could manage that.
Sure.
So, and Joy, speaking to kind of what you were talking about with that article, I found that I gained a good deal of experience and kind of became more current with the opportunity that I was given as a volunteer. I was able to, still write articles for our local military paper and some things like that, and just be in a work setting,
Right.
Using more current tools than I had been exposed to in my prior work experience. So, and I feel like that really helped me to make that transition, and it was another thing to put on my resume as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had a slightly different experience. I had a much shorter stay-at-home mom experience that was a little bit more forced on me because of the military. I was a full-time teacher for many, many years, so my full-time parent experience was more on the summers. And then when my husband changed commands, we came up here to Lexington Park, and my opportunities to follow my teaching path were a little bit smaller. And actually, Sarah helped me a lot in being able to find a home with AVIAN, and it was part-time, which was great for me because I was pregnant at the time too. So I was moving to a new location, trying to start a new career path, being pregnant, trying to set up a house here, finding, doctors, childcare, different things like that. And then, of course, COVID hit on top of everything. So, being a part-time, again, I didn't have, it wasn't a full-time position, but it was an internship. And that did allow me to be able to dabble a little bit, be able to show those at AVIAN what I could do and the different talents that I could bring. And luckily, I've been able to work on different projects with miscellaneous people. I'm part of the innovation team, but I've also branched out into helping other people as well. And it's allowed me to feel a little bit human again. I think we can relate to that sometimes when we are surrounded by little ones. Sometimes you forget how to adult and you crave that adult interaction. And even though now it's, via computers, I still get to have that interaction and still get to feel like I'm a part of my household, not just taking care of the kids and cooking and cleaning and organizing, but I'm a part of a team outside of that as well, and helping to take care of things here.
Well, I think you made a good point there, Kelly, too, about just feeling like yourself again. I know a lot of moms, probably dads too, when they return after some time, they have that guilt. They have that mom guilt or dad guilt about not being home with their kids all day long. But there's a lot of people who just, I feel I'm a better mom by leaving my house, by having an outside career, about being part of a team and feeling like I'm contributing something besides to the laundry and, setting up dinner and running kids here and there. And, I think parents need to learn to not feel bad about that, not feel bad about getting out of the house and doing something for themselves, because I think as a whole, it's probably better for everyone.
Yeah, and I think, making the decision that's best for your family is really important, and not having the guilt either way. Whether you decide to return to work after being a stay-at-home parent, or you continue on with your career, or you do kind of what Kelly's talking about right now and have a mix of, being having a little bit more flexible work schedule, but still being part of a very important part of a working team, and having a little more time to devote to your family in addition to that as well. So, and I think that's one of the really nice opportunities right now in today's work environment, is we do have a little bit more flexibility than I think we've necessarily had in the past. And actually, when I came back to AVIAN, when I started at AVIAN, I started as a temp hire, and then I applied for a position that was full time, and I said, I really feel like I can probably support this position part time. Would you be willing to entertain having a part time employee? So we tried it, and initially, I think it worked really well as a part time position, and then it transitioned to a full time position. But that was really what I felt like was best for my family, and I was very fortunate that AVIAN was able to accommodate that. That's not always the case, but you see many different working environments where you have job shares, and just a lot. I think there's a good deal of flexibility right now, and I think, Kelly, that's kind of what you were speaking to too.
Yes, and having an employer that understands that flexibility, especially in times that we're going through right now, I think that there are more employers that are open to the flexibility than they used to be. But that's a huge part of any successful career as well. But your partner, whoever it is at home, being flexible and supportive of that schedule. It's really nice because my husband can work with me. I don't have to come in, but the times that I do, I'm able to work with him and say, hey, can you stay home with the kids for an hour or two? And luckily his schedule is flexible enough that he's able to do that as well. So finding that balance, and Sarah, like you said, what works for you? What works for your family? But on the other side, we talked about guilt a little bit. I came to my boss and I said, forgive me because I'm going to sound horrible right now, but I don't think that I'm meant to be a stay-at-home mom. And that's okay too. Because like you said, it's sometimes it's better to be able to leave, have that time, and then come back because you're refreshed a little bit. You're not constantly dealing with the same thing every single minute of the day. You have that breather. You can come back and look at a problem with fresh eyes, or, whatever is going on, or whatever you need to do to be a part of your family unit and be successful with your family unit as well, not just work. So it's okay to not feel guilty for coming back to work. There are people that are amazing and can just take everything in stride and everything with ease, and not everybody's like that. And it's okay. It's okay to be the opposite.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I think right now, I feel like there's a bit more pressure, though, on of having that guilt, because this past year has taught us that, it's become quite a juggling act, because most of these kids have been home with their working parents all year long. And, maybe they've fallen behind in school and things like that. And again, that adds kind of to that guilt. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're all learning. Mm-hmm. We're all learning in this environment. We're still learning every day what works, what doesn't work. And, I've noticed, on social media and stuff like that, moms should just quit and stay at home. And, and I don't think that's fair. When
it's not always a choice either.
Right.
Well,
it's not always
too.
a choice. I mean,
exactly.
we're not everybody has two parents living in the same home that can, balance that either. We have single parents. We have parents that really both need to be working for one reason or another. So I think that you bring up a very valid point, Joy, and that it's really about just kind of doing, like I said before, doing what's best for your family and doing what you need to do for your family. And I'm in a situation where my kids are older, my children are older, so this whole scenario has not been as difficult on my family as I've seen with people trying to juggle multiple children, multiple schedules, multiple demands, jobs. My hat's off to all of the parents trying to manage younger children in a virtual environment right now because and supporting job and home and family life too. I don't know how they're doing it. So
well, that's where the flexible employers
Right.
come in, and
Exactly.
Kelly had mentioned. It seems a lot of people, this, if anything, has opened their eyes to allowing their employees a more flexible schedule. Just maybe because you can't work straight from 8 to 4 or 8 to 5 doesn't mean you're not productive. Sometimes I was working till 10, 11, maybe even midnight some nights, but the work was getting done.
Right.
The work was getting done, just in a different time frame. And I think, if anything, this has opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that, family does come first, but it doesn't mean you still can't do a good job.
Right, absolutely. So Joy, what are some of the things that you would recommend if you were, if you had maybe a friend, and I have people speak to me regularly about this, so I think this is a really great episode. If you have a friend that's been a stay-at-home mom for a significant, or dad, for a significant amount of time, what would be the steps that you would recommend to them to prepare for returning to the work environment?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, if you are returning and your children are young and you're going to need childcare, you need to be prepared to understand that you're probably not going to have a lot of take-home pay after that.
Okay.
However, when I did return, because I had returned to work, I also was able to provide the opportunity for my children to go to preschool. Because on one income, we couldn't, because we have triplets. So we could not afford to send 3 of them to preschool at the age of 2 on a single income. But by my going back to work, we were able to afford them that opportunity. And then, of course, we had to pay for childcare after school. So you need to be kind of prepared for that. But at the same time, recognize that you have the opportunity then to contribute to a 401k. You're paying into Social Security. You can possibly take advantage of your employer's FSA, both dependent care and health care. So it's kind of a hard pill to swallow when you're not left with a whole lot of pay when it's said and done, but there's other benefits of that. So there's that. Yeah, it's just the reality.
So it sounds like you're recommending that parents really sit down, or people sit down and kind of create a worksheet, a financial worksheet,
Basically.
and look at the costs versus the benefits of working outside of the home.
Yes.
And kind of figure out where that's going to put your family.
Right.
Because there could be tax implications as well.
Sure. But there was that, and again, learning to just readjust kind of your entire life.
Sure.
Things you're just gonna have to learn to let a little bit go, because you're not gonna be at home all day, able to maybe stay on top of the laundry, or there might be some dirty dishes in the sink when you get home. Things like that. Learning to just let some things go.
Sure.
That's a big adjustment, because I'm a little bit OCD about that. But it'll get done. It'll all get done in due time. And preparing your children for that.
Okay.
When they're used to having mom or dad home all the time. Even just this past year. I mean, my kids are old enough to understand what's been going on, but it's still hard today, because I was getting ready to go to work, and they asked, Mommy, are you going to work at work or on the computer? Because they've gotten so used to me being home
Being
now
around,
that
right?
it's hard on them again when I do leave the house. And we've just tried to talk to them through this whole thing. But when they were younger, we just talked about how Mommy was going to go to work now too, just like Daddy, and I'll be home at 4:30 every day, and things like that, and finding the right childcare and getting them comfortable with that. It all kind of plays into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kelly, what are you and I kind of had a process when we were working together on finding you a position at AVIAN. So what are some recommendations or some kind of takeaways from that experience that you would recommend, or you would like to kind of talk to?
So one of the biggest things for me was talking to my network. You know, especially when you're transitioning, it's really hard to look at your resume and go, how do I fit in? This is something that I think I can do, but how do I present myself to show that I can do this? Especially for me, I have a fine arts degree in photography, and now I'm doing research for innovations. Those two things, when you look at a piece of paper, have nothing to do with each other. But when you're talking with people, you find that they really do, and especially my teaching experience. So
Yes.
being able to look at what you do on a day-to-day basis and how can you word that and how can you present yourself. But talking with that network is so incredibly important. Luckily, you know, as I said, Sarah, you really helped me because I, you know, kept applying and applying and applying. And then we've had a few conversations. I went to job fairs, talked to recruiters at job fairs, talked to different schools, and, you know, said, okay, this is something that I can do. But luckily you were able to reach out to me as well and say, hey, what about this opportunity? So being able to be open-minded as well, because originally I was looking for full-time. I was looking for things maybe a little bit more straightforward, whereas this was an opportunity to try something new. It was a little bit different from what I was used to, but, you know, take that leap. Have faith in yourself, have faith in those around you, and really look at what assets you can bring that might be out of the norm. And talking about preparing the family too, because yes, when you go back to work, certain things are going to drop off. And that's something financially you need to talk about. If you have a partner at home, you definitely need to talk about those things because childcare is expensive. It's expensive. And also the understanding with whoever's in your household about, yeah, there are certain things that might not happen right away like they used to, or, you know, might not even happen within a few days, and getting used to that. Or sometimes, you know, you just go, you know what? I made the decision. We're ordering dinner tonight because I just can't today, you know, and that happens. But having those conversations, being able to talk and have conversations with those that are in your household with that transition are one of the most important things.
Yeah, I think that's a
Absolutely.
really good point, Kelly. And I think looking at it from my standpoint, when I was working with Kelly, I identified that she'd be a great addition to AVIAN. It was just kind of the timing and figuring out how that would work. And she was very easy to work with, very flexible. From my standpoint, when we have someone who wants to join the labor pool, it's a huge win. We have a very small labor market here in Southern Maryland, and I feel like, you know, we're constantly trying to bring new people into this market. So when we have a candidate who's willing to say, hey, this is where I was going originally, but I'm willing to work with you and be a little flexible. This sounds like it would be a great opportunity that might work its way into something else eventually. Then I feel like you have a real win as well. And recruiters we want to put people in positions that are going to make them happy. And we really want to fill positions too. So having people enter the workforce that have not been in the workforce for a while, it's exciting.
And they're probably eager to get to work.
Yeah,
And
sure.
you know they're going to work hard. You know, that's the whole reason they're applying. You know, because if they're like me, they're just excited to leave their house. Like, please give me something to do.
Well, and there are so many resources in our community. I know our library has some kind of return to work type training resources available. Our Tri-County Community Center or Workforce has different programs that are available. So really reach out. If you're in a military setting, the Fleet and Family Services can be very helpful. There are many different resources out there, colleges, community colleges. So make sure if you have been out of the workforce for a while and you're looking to get back in, do everything you can to prepare yourself and make yourself as current as possible.
Right. Well, I think that kind of brings up a good point as well, too, to not necessarily be intimidated when you see a job description. You might only meet 2 or 3 of the key skills that someone is looking for. I would say don't let that intimidate you, though, if you don't fit that job description like a mold. Because, again, employers could be passing up someone great if that's all they were looking for. But I think, I believe Avian's very much like that, where they don't expect someone to necessarily fit into a box, but they recognize certain skill sets could help fill maybe another position that they weren't considering. So don't let those job descriptions intimidate you. If you're interested in something, apply. Put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And I think Kelly brought up a super good point. We don't, of course, have as many right now, but I think as hopefully as the economy opens up a little bit more and we have the pandemic a little more under control, we'll go back to in-person job fairs. But there are some great virtual job fairs out there too. If you can get your conversation with the recruiter, then that recruiter is more likely to remember you and kind of be able to think about you, not just attached to one job. So, and it's an opportunity to have a conversation and say, hey, this is where I've been. This is where I am right now. And this is where I'd like to be. So how do I get there? What would be some of your suggestions? And we'd love to help candidates find jobs that are going to be a good fit for us. It's always a win when that happens. So I think, Kelly, you had mentioned getting out there and talking to your network. So that getting and expanding your network and letting everyone that you know that you are looking for a position and that, whether it's part-time, full-time, and letting the recruiting people in your area know as well.
Absolutely. And I was on, LinkedIn, different social media outlets. LinkedIn was huge, especially to find, as you said, the virtual recruiting fairs that are going on right now. But that you had mentioned with military spouses, there's a military spouse group out there, but talking with other people that are in your situation. And I had a lot of other moms that said, I attended this fair, or my husband attended this fair, or this is the person that you should talk to. Don't be afraid to show your resume either. I feel, especially when you're trying to get back into the workforce, you have a little bit of fear of what are people going to think. I haven't updated my resume in X amount of years, and now it's completely different. Well, don't be afraid to show it to somebody. Don't be afraid to share it, even just for hey, can you look at it and give me some feedback? What would you change? Is there a little bit too much going on? As a photographer, I saw a lot of resumes, especially when I was finding the replacement for my own position, where they had so much graphic design things all over it. And it was like, okay, this does look cool, but you need to tone it down a little bit for a recruiter or for whoever's looking to be able to get what you're really trying to say. As well as, not having a lot of fluff, but you still want to let somebody know that you know what you're talking about. So that was helpful to me. It was to share it, and people with different field backgrounds. So not just fellow educators or artists. I gave it to contractors. I gave it to engineers. Anybody that I could find, saying, "Hey, can you please look at this and let me know what you think, or how might I be able to make myself look better?" So,
yeah, that's some good advice, and I think I've mentioned it in past podcasts as well. But when you have a good deal of graphic elements in your resume, sometimes uploading them into the applicant tracking systems, it doesn't necessarily go well.
Translate.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily go well, especially if you don't have it as a PDF, saved as a PDF. And even then, there can be some issues. And really, as much as everyone loves a beautiful resume, it's what's on the resume that is what we really need to see, especially when we're qualifying someone for a position on contract. So yeah, good, very good topics. Good advice.
I am going to jump back in here because we are hitting that 30-minute mark. There is one more thing that I want to ask you guys, and it falls within this realm of resumes. So I assume a lot of the time when parents are coming back into the workforce, there's that gap in experience. Sarah, from a recruiting standpoint, how would somebody kind of explain that or account for that gap? And then maybe Kelly or Joy, if you've experienced having to put together a resume where you have a couple years of gap because of being a parent at home, maybe from that perspective, explain how that played out for you guys.
So I've seen it kind of addressed in different ways, and I actually don't see it as a detriment. So I think however the candidates have expressed it is completely fine. I've seen it specifically stated, I've seen it done cute ways, like, with just a little explanation, managed household or something like that. And I've also just seen a gap there as well. So when I'm looking at the resume, I'm really looking to see if the candidate qualifies for the position. That's what's important to me. So if I haven't seen it done in a way that I didn't think was appropriate. So I think there are many different ways that you can manage that gap. I don't think it's bad to just, put in there that managed household or something like that. If that's the way that you feel comfortable addressing it, it's not something that anybody should feel is not okay to put on a resume or, obviously, if you need to have 10 years of experience and you don't have that on your resume, it's not really going to matter what you put because you need that 10 years of experience. But I think there are many different ways to address it. And I think just looking at resume sites, you can find the way that you feel the most comfortable with yourself.
Personally, for me, I don't think it was a big deal when I returned to the workforce because, like Sarah said, I had the experience. I had the experience that they needed. I was out of the workforce maybe about 4 years. And most of that was because we moved here. We were stationed here, and I came from television news. So unless I was going to drive to D.C. every day, there wasn't obviously an opportunity to continue that career path. But I was fortunate, and I didn't really have to account for those missing years. But Kelly, I think you had mentioned earlier about volunteer opportunities, and I know, Sarah, you had mentioned that as well. And I did do that during my years where I was staying home. When we were stationed in Norfolk, I was the FRG president. Then when we were here, I was actually ombudsman at VX1 for a year or so. So I filled in a little bit of that gap with just some volunteer opportunities, and I absolutely included those on my resume because, again, there was different skill sets that were required to even fill those positions.
Yeah, and I think charity is a big thing to bring up, either charity or volunteer, any of those positions. Even if you're not working full time, even if you're not working part time, those positions definitely still count. If you think back to your high school days, if you ever talked to a college counselor and they said, hey, we want that, colleges want to see somebody that's well-rounded, not just focused on one thing. And I think the same is true for employers. So yes, you might be at home with your kids or, have those quote unquote gap years for whatever reason, but you're still doing things. So, look for those opportunities as well. If you're passionate about something, volunteer. I did a lot in college and out of college as a young professional. I did a lot as a parent. Sometimes I know it's harder, but are you working with your kids' PTA at all? Are you a classroom mom or dad? We have close ties to the military, obviously, in the area that we are. But like you said, FRG, ombudsman, spouse club, any of those sort of things, put that on your resume. you won't have that gap if you put those on your resume. And I think a lot of people are just afraid to have that gap, but I think it's becoming a little bit more understandable nowadays that that happens. I did not necessarily have that gap, with the exception of just because of our move and then trying to find a new position. But don't be afraid to put that experience on there.
Yeah, I think that is great advice from all of you. I do want to wrap it up here because we are getting on the lengthy side for this one. But as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe we switch up the scheduling a little bit. Let's release this around Mother's Day, since I think it's an appropriate time.
That was absolutely great.
So I think this will be a special Sunday episode of the Work Awesome podcast, releasing on May 9th. Like I said, the scheduling might switch up a little bit from there, but Joy, Kelly, Sarah, thank you for leading this episode, because it was a really, really great conversation. And I will see everybody next time.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ian.
It was so nice to be here with the two of you.
This was fun.
Yeah.